Welcome back to another edition of GTN Coach's Corner, where we answer all your triathlon-related questions. On this week's show, can/should I train on a hangover?
That's quite a topical one. How should I structure a run-only training block for triathlon?
Why is my blood sugar dropping during my training sessions?
And can you or how should you fit team sports into your triathlon training?
Remember, we'll be answering your question next week if you use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner in the comment section below this video or any of our videos and ask us your triathlon-related question. Next week we could be answering it. So let's go straight on with our questions from Fallon Van Zitter.
That's a powerful name.
Fallon Van Zitter.
I like that name.
Okay. GTN Coaches Corner. Question regarding blood sugar levels dropping during swimming at certain times of day. I have a particular issue when it comes to swimming and my blood sugar level dropping. This typically only happens when I swim later in the day between 4 and 5 p.m., even though I've eaten a good breakfast and lunch. If I go and attempt to swim anything over 2 Ks, my blood sugar drops. I get slightly shaky, and if I leave it there around my mouth, it gets tingly and slightly numb, and I literally have to eat a banana to feel normal again. Here's where it becomes tricky. If I swim first thing in the morning, like 5 a.m., without eating anything other than dinner the night before, I can easily swim approximately 4 kilometers. I do not have sugar issues, not diabetic. Also, this does not happen if I run or bike, unless I have not eaten for most of the day. Okay. There is a fair amount to unpack here.
I feel like I've written this, actually.
This is clearly something that Mark has experienced. We could actually do with a bit more information, like what they're having for lunch and how often they are eating. But they've given us a few clues to go on. Firstly, it definitely does sound like a blood sugar drop. Those are classic blood sugar drop symptoms. Getting dizzy,
what time is it? It is 3 o'clock. Yeah. So I'm not even exercising. I'm already feeling those
Mark and I
feelings,
are on schedule for a blood sugar drop any minute now. So we're going to try and get through this Coach's Corner before we go and eat something because, we are both prone to these exact feelings. The fact that it only happens in the evenings or evening sessions is quite easily explained, actually. If you wake up in a fasted state, you obviously haven't eaten anything, so you would imagine your blood sugar would be really low. However, because you haven't eaten anything for 10 to 12 hours, your body is already using fat as a fuel source, primarily. That's all it's using. And therefore, you can exercise, and you can pretty much exercise indefinitely because you have a lot of fat reserves. No offense. Everyone has lots of fat reserves. So you can keep going at a lower intensity for a really long time, and you will see no kind of blood sugar changes that are drastic. It won't be any sudden drop-offs or anything like that.
Which is why you're finding you're able to do 4K in the morning without a problem.
Yeah, exactly. But then later on in the day, you've eaten breakfast and lunch, and they actually said that. They gave us the clue. They ate breakfast, they ate lunch. And then at 4 p.m., they're experiencing this blood sugar drop. And that is because, ironically, you've eaten. So you ate and your body was using carbs as a fuel source for that whole afternoon, probably from 1 o'clock where you ate lunch for 3 hours, right up until about 4 p.m. when you got in the pool. And then suddenly it ran out of carbs and you had a massive blood sugar drop. Your body you weren't going to die, you weren't going to starve right there and then. You were switching over to the fat as a fuel source. And that switch, right when that switch happens, can leave a massive blood sugar drop. You have they have this little phase where you have very little blood sugar and your body has to switch over to that fat as a fuel source. And it can feel pretty awful. The solution is fairly simple. Regular people can eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals a day, and they can get through their day. Athletes have to eat to train. That means you have to time your eating around your training. You need to eat something 1 to 2 hours before you train. You can't have lunch at 12 o'clock and then go and swim at 4 or 5 p.m. Having not eaten anything for 4 or 5 hours. You have to eat something 1 to 2 hours before. You can even top that up just before you start with a gel or a bar or something like that to make sure you get through that session effectively. Now, the issue we always have with this when you say this to people is that, well, then I'm going to be overeating and all those weight loss goals and everything. The reason I'm training is just going to go out the window because I'm having lunch a small lunch at 11 and another lunch at 3 so that I can get through my swim.
But you're not making it through your swim, are you?
Exactly.
And you're not getting the most out of it. So, fuel for that swim better. For instance, I'm about to go and head for a run after work and I would not make it through that run or probably to the start of that run if I didn't have some food pretty soon.
Yeah, so you'll do the session longer and probably harder if you're filled up with carbs than you would do it without. In fact, you would probably stop halfway as you have done and get far less calorie burn. Overall, your overall balance would probably actually be more favorable if you ate more during the day and got the session done really well than if you ate less during the day and struggled your way through.
And you got to think of the knock-on consequences of that. So you then go into this a massive reserve, or you're trying to switch over to the fats and you feel terrible, it has a knock-on not only to your training, your recovery, and you probably end up going and raiding the fridge after that.
Binge eating, after that, trying to survive, So, make sure you try and get that blood sugar constant throughout the day. And that, for most athletes, and when I was an athlete, I didn't eat meals, I ate like pre-training, post-training, and then the gap in between training. There was no such thing as a meal. It was just eating the whole time, grazing kind of small meals every 2 hours. And when I was at peak training, I literally couldn't get 2 hours without a substantial amount of food. So bear that in mind. You cannot eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner and think you're going to get through a session in the evening before dinner.
Right.
Okay.
Big topic, that one. Right, next one from Lightwing. I grew up as a swimmer in triathlon. I'm normally out in the top 5 out of the water. My cycling has improved a lot in the last couple of years, so these days I normally don't give up too many places on the bike. However, the run is where I'm normally passed by a lot of other athletes. I have a goal this winter of improving my running so that I could be more competitive in triathlon next year. I can run around 45 minutes for 10k. Not too bad already, but losing a lot of ground to those sub 40-minute 10k runners. So we're looking at pretty fast racing here. I quite like the idea of structuring my run training around 3 core run sessions per week. 1 interval session, 1 tempo run, and 1 long run. My question is, how to best use the remaining 4 days of the week? Is it better to do 2 easy 5-kilometer runs with 2 rest days, or 4 easy, shorter 2-kilometer runs, so that my body gets a more frequent training stimulus? I should add that this will be an increase to my overall volume, as I normally run around 3 times a week at the moment, and so on.
Wow,
a lot to go on. Actually, I think this is a really interesting one.
It does point to the challenge of triathlon, that everyone's got something they need to work on. He's clearly doing well on the swimming and the biking, but he really needs to work on his run. Well, for the run block, though, you have to be very careful. You say you're currently running 3 times a week, and you are literally talking to us about upping that to 7 times a week. And you can immediately see the issue here. You simply can't do that. That is very risky.
And also, he's currently running 3 times a week, but presumably he's talking about adding in some intensity, some intervals, tempo, long run. So you're adding quite a lot more just to those 3 runs in itself.
Yeah, people like to do a run block, and there's nothing wrong with doing a run block, but you have to bear in mind that your run block has to take into account your run volume before you start. You can't just wipe out the swimming and the biking and think you can replace all of those sessions with running. Because running is weight bearing, that risk of injury is really, really high if you suddenly ramp up the mileage. To answer your question as far as the scheduling goes, we would definitely say that if you are going to fit runs in those other days, other than your hard sessions, you should definitely have 2 rest days in there and 2 easy days, rather than 4 easy days and running every day. Time off your legs, or days off your legs, is definitely important for recovery. And recovery is actually going to be your challenge here. An interval session, a tempo session, and a long run in the week is pretty much the absolute maximum of solid run sessions you can do in a week. In fact, I'd probably even say that might be too much, and you may need to monitor your own response to this run load to see whether you maybe want to swap one of those out. You
could alternate the interval and the tempo run from week to week.
Exactly.
So you've got
you may want to swap
3
one
runs,
of those out.
1 sort of interval tempo, 1 easy, 1 longer run.
And if you do feel like you're not recovering, simply just don't do the hard session. Just do an easy run that day. It is definitely not worth the risk of getting an injury just to get that 1 more session in. We'd suggest you also don't drop the swimming and biking completely if you are going to do a run block and you're a triathlete. I know it is tempting to really run well and cram in that running in the off season, because your swimming and your running and your biking are going just fine. But you can use your swimming and biking to aid your running. It's not just a drain on your run or your run time. You have plenty of time to run. Running is very time intensive. It's very time efficient. So you have plenty of time to get all the running in. Do some swims where you focus on a bit of kick to flush out those legs, but then the rest of the time you put your pull buoy in so that you can focus on those run sessions. Similarly with the bike, do your bikes, but make sure they're easy, do them at a slightly higher cadence, do them at low intensity, to flush out all that waste products that you've built up on that hard run session. In fact, as far as doing 2 easy runs a week, you could maybe even do less than 2 easy runs a week, and do your recovery runs on the bike. Do your recovery runs in the pool, and just do the high intensity runs for your week, so that you are fully recovered for the next high intensity run.
I would be very careful about adding in those extra runs on top of adding in some intensity. Maybe just do that over a very
One at a
gradual
time.
period of
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Right, next question from Justin Weaver. I'm active in some team sports and love to mountain bike. How can I best incorporate these activities with my triathlon training? This year, I tried to replace interval type workouts with these activities and it seemed to work okay. Just wondering if there is a better approach. Now, both of us actually used to do quite a bit of mountain biking in our training. I used to do pretty much every week I go out and mountain bike. And it's brilliant. I mean, you will travel slower, typically, given the terrain that you'll be mountain biking on. But it's because of the terrain that you're riding on, you can have quite stochastic kind of efforts. So then you end up with these sort of natural intervals in your training. So it's fantastic for those sort of high power, short burst efforts in natural training in that mountain biking.
Yeah, which just if you are swapping for mountain biking, swap the duration. So if you were going to do an hour on the road, do an hour on the mountain bike. If you're going to do 30 Ks on the road, don't go do 30 Ks on the mountain bike because it is more intense and you will be working a bit harder and it does take a lot longer. It's a lot slower. So bear that in mind. But yeah, mountain biking is pretty much a straight swap. As for the team sports, it kind of depends on the sport, of course, because many team sports are different. But
and your position.
Yeah, I assume, maybe if you're goalie, you don't have to worry too much about it. But I assume you're talking about a team sport where you're running around a pitch of some sort. They can be great. They're great for stability, for your core work, for just that agility and using all those stabilizing muscles that you don't necessarily strain.
We're very guilty as endurance or runners, cyclists. We're very linear, sort of running in a straight line and don't always have the sort of the strength laterally. And actually, when team sports people come across into, like Kat Matthews, for instance, came from hockey, and you can see she's very strong when she runs. You can see her form. She just holds herself really well. And I think a lot of that is attributed to her past of team sports and hockey.
So there's nothing wrong with them. However, you have to plan them into your training accordingly because it's essentially like a high intensity interval session, and you wouldn't do that on the back of a long run or back of a long ride where you are already tired. And the same thing with team sports. You can't expect to go sprinting around a pitch, straining all those muscles and all those stabilizers when you're already tired because your legs just won't respond well and you are risking injury. So you need to make sure they're planned into your session. Don't do them when you're excessively tired. Rather do it the other way around. After you've played your team sport, then go for a long ride or a long run to flush out all of that hard work you did. It is, of course, important that when your event is drawing near, you may want to tone down the team sports. There is a risk of injury when you're doing team sports because simple the nature of them, the constant changing of direction, etc., regardless of what the sport is. And you don't want to throw away all that hard work you've done for a triathlon with a silly little tumble while you're playing a kickabout with your mates, like I maybe did playing football last night.
All right. Final question. This one's fairly relevant for this time of year. Comes from Humphrey Linders. I'm pretty fit and want to keep my fitness over the holidays and with the wedding coming up. But I know that I'll be indulging a bit and probably experience at least a couple of hangovers in the coming weeks. Should I just accept those are recovery days or should I train on those days? In the past, I tried training and felt rubbish in the session, but maybe a bit better after. But that might have just been the easing of my guilt. Should I have just stayed in bed? Are there health risks?
Well, life is about balance, and we wouldn't want to tell you that you shouldn't have the balance in your life. And by balance, we don't mean having a drink in both hands. It's okay to let your hair down once in a while, even if you're an A-type athlete, even if you are going to Kona next year and you absolutely have to be training, still you need some balance. So feel free to let your hair down. That said, you can go and exercise with a hangover, but there are a few caveats. There are things that you need to be aware of when it comes to a hangover. Primary one being, the reason you feel terrible is partly because of all those toxins flowing around your blood, but also mainly because of the dehydrating effect of alcohol. Alcohol is a diuretic and it will flush the fluids out of your system and leave you dehydrated. That's mostly what your banging headache is about. You are dehydrated. We all know the risks of exercising dehydrated. It's not healthy to risk dehydrated, to exercise dehydrated. So bear that in mind. Make sure you get on top of your hydration before you go and exercise or do any particularly strenuous exercise.
Or you just need to dial in that post-night out routine. So you come in through the door, stumbling through the door, electrolyte tab in your bottle.
I think we've gone back to university, Mark. Yeah.
It's a game changer, I'm telling you.
Yeah, get on top of your hydration before you go. And then, of course, keep your intensity low when you are out there. You just don't want to be doing high intensity stuff, even if you're slightly dehydrated, never mind chronically dehydrated. You don't want to be doing high intensity stuff. So keep the intensity low. You probably want to anyway. Also, exercise requires fuel. Carbs, energy. And you'll often find that when you have a big night out, you ate dinner and then you haven't eaten anything for 16 hours, 20 hours since, and you wake up in the morning not feeling like eating anything either, and the guilt makes you want to go and do a session, but you can't do that without eating. So make sure you get on top of your fueling first, and if you absolutely can't stomach eating anything, exercise is not going to make you feel any better. Make sure you prioritize getting some food, some fuel back into you.
And the other thing to consider, and a lot of people obviously reach for these after a big night out, the head might be hurting, is painkillers, and to be wary of those, and then going and doing exercise with these in your system.
Yeah, they can cause GI distress. They can also cause kidney damage. They can even cause kidney failure if you have quite a few of them, combined with the dehydration that we already mentioned. They can be quite dangerous. So if you are reaching for the painkillers, maybe if your head is too sore for you to go out without painkillers, you should probably just get back in bed and call it a recovery day. It's not worth the risk.
Can I also just point out as well, if you're planning on heading out on your bike and you're still reaching for painkillers, there might be
it might be a good day for a turbo, let's put it that way.
Yeah, let's just stay indoors, and maybe it's best for everyone on the roads as well.
I think the simple principle is go, enjoy your festive season, and don't feel too guilty for having a day off afterwards if you need it. And with that, we're going to say goodbye, and thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.